Hello there my fellow notebook aficionados and welcome back to the channel. We have a good one for you today, since this beauty right here in front of me is the updated Zephyrus G16 for 2025. And despite everyone complaining that gaming laptops get thinner every year, given the general interest we see in our videos and how companies keep pushing for sleeker form factors, well, it seems that deep down we all want our laptops to be as thin as possible without sacrificing performance, without burning our fingers on hot aluminum chassis, or without fan noise that make our ears bleed. While all of this is simply not possible, since as you all know, the perfect notebook does not exist, Asus got quite close with this one last year and they are back for 2025. There isn't a lot of new stuff externally, but we get Intel's new ROG H flagship paired with the latest and greatest from Nvidia. And the good folks from ROG also bumped up the wattage for the 5090 to 120 watts. But we also have to address the elephant in the room, and it comes in the matte black fingerprint covered disguise of the Razer Blade 16, which basically offers the same form factor but a lot more raw performance potential. But today will not be that video, since I will mostly focus on the G16 itself, even though we will of course compare the overall performance figures between these two. But for the direct head-to-head between what are probably the most gorgeous looking laptops of 2025, you have to wait a little bit longer, but you should definitely subscribe, since that will be a video you do not want to miss. But again, today is about the Zephyrus, so let's get into it. I mentioned it already, but the obligatory spec refresh is at the heart of the G16, and for our sample, this means the Core Ultra 9 285H and the RTX 5090. Thankfully, the Zephyrus is also following in the footsteps of its more creator-focused sibling, and very much like the ProArt P16, you can now get this one with 64 gigs of RAM. It's still soldered, but at least Asus upped the max capacity for this year, and very much like with the last gen version, you still have a second NVMe slot for future storage expansion. That is also pretty much everything you can do inside of the G16, since again, the RAM is soldered and hidden beneath a massive vapor chamber. Apart from the new internals, pretty much nothing has changed about the Zephyrus, which is mostly a good thing, since it still looks as gorgeous as ever and there is absolutely nothing to complain about build quality. And with an HDMI 2.1, a Thunderbolt 4 USB-C, the first USB-A and the audio port on the left, and a full-size SD card reader, the second USB-A, and a USB-C 3.2 Gen 2, there's also not that much missing from the overall port selection. If you want to do nitpicking, which you absolutely can at this price point, oh, and by the way, have I said that this one is very expensive yet? Anyway, back to nitpicking, you do not get Thunderbolt 5. I would assume because there is simply not enough space for the needed controller, or it's just too expensive. But it would have been great to add an external GPU to this one at some point in the future. While I feel the hinges are a little stiffer than on last year's version, I may be hallucinating, and compared to what's out there, things can still get a bit wobbly when adjusting the screen to your desired position. Speaking about the screen, it's the same from last year once again, so the experience you are getting from the snappy OLED is what we are used to by now, with stellar contrast, great color gamut coverage, very accurate factory calibration, additional color presets should you need them, and simply class-leading response times. Of course, overall brightness is no match for a mini LED panel, but those seem to die out in this form factor, and as with all OLEDs, you have to deal with PWM. But it's pretty high in the G16, so it should not be too much of a problem. For me personally, the touchpad is a bit too rattly, since it almost feels a little bit loose. But then again, you should hardly have a problem with the keyboard. The switches offer quite a bit of travel and a very tactile pressure point, and the overall layout worked well for me, though that is of course highly subjective. Alright, that should cover everything we already know and love about the G16, so let's see what's actually new. As per usual, we did some general testing right up front to give you guys an idea of what to expect from the ROG's different power modes in terms of wattages, performance differences, and how those are tied to fan noise. We did most of our testing in turbo, and in our CPU rating, the new ROG H silicon gives us a pretty solid performance uplift compared to the 2024 G16. And the hybrid core architecture, consisting of 6 performance cores, 8 efficiency cores and an additional pair of low power E-cores, is basically tied with the 12-core 24-thread Strix Point silicon in the Blade 16. Cinebench 24 alone gives the 285H the lead in single core performance, while AMD is slightly ahead in multi-core scenarios. However, to be honest, you will be very hard pressed to feel a difference in the real world. If we take Apple's latest M4 Pro and M4 Max into account, well, my heart bleeds as a die-hard Windows guy, but there's simply no reason to mince words here. When it comes to CPU performance, Apple is simply light years ahead. System performance, tested with PCMark, does not offer any real surprises, and we got a really good number from the G16 here, while the competition is not that far behind. Drive performance is also impeccable, with speedy transfers and no throttling whatsoever during our torture tests. But let's talk GPU, since that will most likely be the biggest upgrade here this year, right? Well, yes, kinda. In Firestrike, in fairness, a test that stresses both the CPU and GPU at the same time, which is always a little bit of an Achilles heel for these super thin gamers, the difference between this one and last year's 4090 G16 is not massive, and the blade can already score a pretty big lead here. TimeSpy shows a larger gain for the G16 compared to its predecessor thanks to the general performance gain and additional wattage, while the blade is still ahead, even though the difference is not quite as big in more GPU-bound scenarios. Interestingly, the G16 has the edge in our gaming rating, despite the more CPU-bound titles in our rotation and the fact that we are testing in 1080p here. The difference is almost non-existent though, and again not something you would really feel, whereas the lead over the 4090 in the 2024 Zephyrus is much more substantial. Comparing actual frame rates tells a different story though, especially in QHD, where the Blade 16 simply has the edge with its much faster variant of Nvidia's mobile flagship for 2025. Also, as I mentioned before, we will compare these two in much more detail and discuss more games in the next video, so please make sure to subscribe so you won't miss that one. If you can't wait, head on over to our website. Our written review already provides much more information about the G16, as always the link is in the description below. As you all know by now, the RTX 5090 does not offer a tremendous uplift in raw GPU compute performance, be it for games or applications. However, you get a much larger frame buffer with a total of 24 gigs. Of course, that will be much more interesting for creators, and I will get you some additional benchmarks for such use cases when we do our comparison with the Blade. So again, either keep an eye out on the channel in the next few days, or should you watch this in the future, I will also add the link to that video in a pinned comment. In addition to the increase in VRAM capacity, you of course also have access to multi-frame generation, and we talked about this a lot already, and to give you an idea of what to expect from the new tech, I ran some additional benchmarks in Cyberpunk in the Ray Tracing Overdrive preset. And also, please let me know if these benchmarks with different DLSS settings and multiple levels of frame generation are important to you, and if we should add more games to our videos. Please sound off in the comments below. When it comes to fan noise, you should definitely utilize the silent mode when you're not doing anything super intense, since otherwise the two fans are not only always on, but also pose a little every now and then, which can be a bit annoying to be honest. It still happens in silent, but at a barely noticeable level. Still, I hope Asus is able to improve this with a future software update. Apart from that, you get the usual thin gaming laptop experience. Performance, which is basically a balanced profile, is audible but bearable, while Turbo will definitely ask for a headset. I do not quite like the high-pitched sounds you get from the G16, but as always, hear for yourself. Also, we usually compare any laptop we test against the G14 because it's basically the benchmark when it comes to laptop speakers. But of course, the big brother is as well, so please enjoy a small sneak peek comparing it to the Razer Blade 16. Away from the wall, the G16 performs very well and can improve tremendously on its predecessor. It also shows more endurance than the Blade 16 in our Wi-Fi test. So if you're looking for a powerful gaming or creator laptop that can also double as your on-the-go entertainment machine, the G16 is very tough to beat. Which basically also sums up this video for today. The G16 is trying to be everything. The ultimate gaming machine backed by the 5090 and a 240Hz G-Sync OLED panel, the ultimate Netflix companion, again with an OLED and some, if not the best laptop speakers on the market right now, and pretty alright battery life, and maybe even your workstation, fueled once more by the 5090, the ROG CPU, clean looks and a well-made chassis. Usually, trying to do everything ends in utter failure, but for the ROG Zephyrus G16 it kind of works. Sure, you get 60-inch laptops with longer battery life, but those usually do not come with a 5090, and you will of course also be able to get much faster machines, probably even with a 5080. Still, those aren't as thin and subtle as the Zephyrus, and you will also be able to get cheaper laptops as this one. Still, again, you will have to sacrifice the overall appearance, speakers, your display experience, and probably the overall performance potential. So yeah, if you need the one for everything, the G16 might be it for 2025. But please folks, let me know what you think. And I know I sound like a broken record, but please do me the favor of hitting that subscribe button so you will not miss the comparison between this one and the Razer Blade 16. I have a feeling it might be a fun video to make. But that should be it for today. Thanks a ton for watching. My name is Alex, you've been fantastic, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one. Take care.